The Miami Dolphins drafted defensive tackle Kenneth Grant at number 13 overall, but then night one continued, and there's plenty of talent left on the board. We're exploring where the sweet spots are for the Dolphins' potential pick at 48 here today on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, and the NFL Draft Lead for the 33rd team. I want to give a special welcome and shout out to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Terms and conditions do apply. We are continuing to pump the caffeine this morning. It's late morning on Friday. I had a chance to restack the draft board. And this is the big deal about going from round one to round two, and all the teams go back and do this once the 32nd pick comes in. They take all the names down off the board that were drafted, and they kind of look at, okay, let's reset our strategy. What happened? What was unexpected? Where was their positional run that kind of changed the dynamics of how we thought this was going to look? You got to finalize your strategy, and then you get a lot of phone calls for teams trying to come up and go get a guy. And that's something that I don't know how much of that is going to be in play for the Dolphins, just based off of it's a team that seems to be really intent and focused on adding more draft capital and young players as compared to giving multiple picks away to be aggressive. We'll see if anything happens with Jalen Ramsey tonight or with any other players on the roster tonight for the Dolphins as they continue to look to move and shake their way up and down the board. But the objective of this show, and it's got a quick turnaround, so shout out to those of you who are going to tune in and make it a part of your day today on Friday. Round two starts at 7 o'clock. Dolphins pick at 48. I wanted to look at the available talent that exists after the first night and how it impacts Miami. So I'm going to pull up, for those of you who are watching on YouTube, the horizontal draft board, and we'll zoom in so everybody can read the names when we're talking about certain things. But really, it's a visual aid for something that we're going to be tangibly talking about. So if you're just listening, you're not missing anything. But it is a visual complement to the names that we're going to be invoking in some of these position runs that happen and positions where there's still sweet spots left. So this is the horizontal draft board in its entirety. If you zoom in and you look at the names who are crossed off the list, names like Ashton Genty and Tyler Warren and Josh Simmons and Will Campbell and Armand Membu, Mason Graham, Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter, Jahdae Barron, Malachi Starks. That was kind of the upper band of those first round grades that we gave out for the Dolphins specific grades. And then the Dolphins obviously drafted this big, handsome fella right here, Kenneth Grant, who is the 12th ranked player on my Dolphins specific board. So there's no complaints at all about getting your 12th ranked player at 13 overall, and it happens to fit a big need and stylistically brings you something you were missing as a football team. I love it, right? And the draft is not one round long, and there's not a termination of a free agency window after the draft is over. They'll add more talent. So the amount of boxes that the Kenneth Grant ad checks for me, I think is so easy to like the decision-making process that they made. And as if you guys are watching here, you can kind of see, I have the Dolphins graded and I have 40 Dolphins players stacked on this board as well. And just to kind of give some perspective on how far down you have to go for the next defensive tackle, after it was Zach Sealer, Mason Graham, who went 5 after all of the buzz about maybe he's going to fall, but he ends up, Jacksonville trades up to 2, and then Cleveland takes him at 5. And then you have Kenneth Grant, the next Dolphins player at defensive tackle on the list is all the way down here, Mr. Benito Jones, hanging out with the 6th round grades. It's a really good defensive tackle class. I got like 20-something names that I'm like, it'd probably be an upgrade over Benito Jones. but they put a player that I have expectations is going to end up being a quality starter for the Dolphins. We're not here to do another Kenneth Grant show, though. What we are here to do in this early segment is acknowledge the 3 names that had first-round grades that are left over. Will Johnson. Actually, there's four names here. Will Johnson, cornerback, Michigan. It's reported to be a degenerative knee issue, in addition to the other injuries he's had in this stretch of time. All of that adds up to kind of a scary diagnostic, especially with the other injuries and questions, and now there's a potential degenerative knee issue. But for as unsettling as that is, the situation for Mike Green, the league has told us with how they chose to handle his situation, where he was once in high school and once at Virginia accused of sexual assault. And while there were no legal ramifications of that to this point in time, still very open-ended allegations against Mike Green. And he tried to attack that head on at the NFL Combine, and teams were responsible for doing their own vetting. And Mike Green does not get drafted in the first round. Then you have Savon Revel, another corner from East Carolina, had an ACL back in September of last year, coming from a smaller school. And then Nicky Manwari, safety from South Carolina. Those are the 4 players left that had firm first-round grades for yours truly in this year's draft class. I would say this. If the Mike Green situation was such that teams dictated that they were just not going to make this decision, I would probably say we're going to be out on that one. I'd let that be a situation and a background history for somebody else to figure out. If the Dolphins are serious about trying to revamp the culture of the locker room, I just feel you'd be better suited maybe looking elsewhere. And then it doesn't hurt that you also have 3 pass rushers that are very highly graded as outside edge rushers that don't really give you much of an improvement by bringing Mike Green in versus what your second and third edge rushers are capable of being. Corner's interesting, though, because you could tell me that if Will Johnson or Savon Revel is there at 48, that should be an obvious no-brainer with the expectation that Jalen Ramsey with the asterisk is going to be off the board. But even Nicky Manwari, if he gets to 48, despite the need that you have at corner, and despite the need that you have for another starter on the offensive line, this group at offensive line's pretty tapped out when you consider Booker, Zabel, and Donovan Jackson as the top 3 true authentic guards are off the board. Now, I have names like Tate Ratledge and Jonas Abanea and Marcus Mbo, who I like for Miami, but they are not graded in the same stratosphere as what Nicky Manwari is. So when you put it through that perspective, and the same said for both Savon Revel and Will Johnson as well. So my mindset as it pertains to like a best player available approach, and we'll talk a little bit more about BPA capable, especially if those 3 names end up running off before Miami gets on the board and what that would look like. If one of those 3 names is there, I'll be very interested to see if 48 is deemed as an appropriate risk with some of the background. And Eamon is more of just strictly speaking a positional value proposition that it doesn't help you that Starks is off the board, but you kind of have a couple of names on day 2 that might linger and coax a team to bypass it in the first 16, 15 picks of the second round to say, hey, we still feel like we can get a guy in the 3rd round or in the 4th round that we're going to really like. So it'll be interesting to watch. But that's the first round grades that I have left. I have 4, a handful. Mike Green with the background questions. Will Johnson with the reported degenerative knee issue for long-term concerns. Savon Revel is a smaller school player coming off of an ACL tear. And then Nicky Manwari is just a position that's a little bit devalued in safety despite his workout profile. So names to know. Names to know that if they're on the board at 48, they're going to be of utmost interest to me based off of those are the grades that I gave to evaluate those players. So you'd have a hard time telling me that wouldn't be a good option to go based off the grades that I gave and where they're stacked on my board. Now, we're going to talk about some more value at positions of need for the Dolphins, including getting into some of the secondary positions of need, not just the primary positions of the need, but the Dolphins obviously addressing that with the Kenneth Grant position last night. That's next year on Locked On Dolphins. Make sure you guys stick with us. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. And that's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clocked out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. Post Your Job is LinkedIn's new feature that can help you write job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip: add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture to double your reach to qualified candidates. It's no wonder 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helps them find high quality hires. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. All right. So having addressed defensive tackle, I would still say this is a position that the Dolphins do have at least a secondary need in. I would say corner is going to transcend it and remain as a primary need for the team. I would say offensive guard, that other starting guard spot, is the other area that lingers as kind of a primary need. I think you could argue a starting safety, which is kind of where we had some of our focus early on in the first segment, is also a primary need, but it's probably at the top of the secondary need bucket just because they have a number of guys capable of being a safety 2 or a safety 3. You just you wish you had a safety 1 to tie it all together. And there's a couple of guys that are out there in free agency that can maybe serve as that for Miami. And you want to let the draft play out so you have your young guys in position and don't then sign a veteran that's going to blockade a young guy from playing when the whole point is, hey, we're kind of going through a little bit of a youth transition here. But as you look at what else lingers as potential secondary needs, I think it's fair to point out tight end. Safety, I would put in that bucket as well. I think it's fair to point out linebacker, just given the lack of longevity for the contracts with some of the names that are brought in. I think it's fair to point out potentially another running back behind, if a player that is there that's too good to pass up and is authentically the best player available. Maybe not at 48. Maybe if Travion Henderson's there at 48, I would at least be a name on my short list from Ohio State, as he's explosive. He's good in pass protection. He's a denser player than what the Dolphins have with Devon Achane. It kind of frees Achane up in the passing game to do a little bit more authentic passing game stuff. So that's I'm not putting it at the top of my shopping list, so please don't get mad at me. But you want to be comprehensive and don't be dismissive of anything. But the primary needs are still offensive guard and corner. Those two spots, I want to zoom back out, and then we'll bring up the board, and then we'll zoom back in because I just love the dramatic effect of seeing the full board, which has now been updated to cross the names off that were drafted last night. Right? You see a lot of gray here at the top. Only one player that had a 3rd round grade on the Dolphins specific board came off last night, and that was running back Marion Hampton, who sits in this bucket down here. I just don't think he's a great fit for the outside zone scheme. But everybody else was in at least a 2nd round grade. There's a handful of 1st round grades left, which we went over. But I want to focus on this group right here. 2nd round and early 3rd round offensive line bucket. Tyler Booker gone at 12. Gray Zabel gone at 18. Donovan Jackson gone at 24. Those were my 3 top authentic interior offensive linemen. You've got a bucket of 1, 2, 3, 4 names with offensive interior capabilities that I think, you're going to be doing the math, counting to see if one of these guys is left. It's Charles Grant from William & Mary, plus athlete. A little bit more of a developmental long-term play. I don't know that he's a slam dunk. He gets boosted by being what I think is a great fit for the scheme, Charles Grant from William and Mary. So I think authentically with the movement skills that he slots in just in front of Tate Ratledge and Jonas Avinaya. But they're closely enough bunched together that I think it's a fair conversation to have to say, if you're drafting a starter, which one of them is ready to start? Do you lean into the development element of it, which you would be doing with Charles Grant because he's the ceiling's higher? But then you have Tate Ratledge, who I think is a better guard right now. But then Savinaya technically has a little bit of tackle flex in his game as well. And didn't have some of the injury stuff, small stuff, not serious, like big-time long-term issues with Tate Ratledge, but he missed some time this year. But he doesn't have any tackle flexibility. So you have three names, really, that I have as kind of the upper band of eligible interior offensive linemen. Charles Grant, who's the upside play and the best physical profile of those three names. Tate Ratledge, who's probably the cleanest, and then Savinaya has some tackle capability, has a lot of linear explosiveness. He gives you some positional flexibility in addition to some raw power and linear explosiveness. I like this profile the most, even though his name, this being Jonas Avinaya, I like that profile the most. And if you walked out of here with Kenneth Grant and Jonas Avinaya in the top 50, you're talking about the all-time meat and potatoes class for a draft class that really needed to have some meat and potatoes. I love the potential of those two players. But the dark horse is Marcus Mbow. A little bit undersized from a length perspective. Has movement skills that rival or transcend that of Charles Grant, but he played at Purdue instead of William and Mary. But he played right tackle. Won't play tackle at the NFL level. But has the ability to play in space in a way in which would grab the Dolphins' attention. Now, the problem is I kind of have him graded closer to picking around 60 as compared to picking in the mid-40s. So do you find a trade partner if that's kind of your preferred pathway? Do you stick and pick and say, hey, we're going to go with, we don't want to go with the small school bet, but then like you're technically dropping down for me and my grades into the next tier down. If the Dolphins have him graded up here and with these same other guys or above these guys and they draft him and they tell you that, I'm going to say, I disagree with you, but okay. Like I see the vision and I get it. I would not dismiss Marcus Mbow as potentially a fit here because he has the upside play, same upside appeal and play as Charles Grant on the inside. But he's coming from a bigger school, and he's probably going to be a little bit more ready to play. I just see him as a little bit more of a risk, and I like him the most at center versus playing him at guard. So that's what you are working with the offensive line group, because every other name is gone. Every other name is off the list. It's one of those four names for me, unless you're going to go with a tackle like Minnesota's Ariante Ursary and then move him and play him at guard with a transition. Now you look at corner. Here's the good news. There's a lot of DBs. I fully expect the DB to be on the table and available. Corners that I have first round, late 1, early 2, or second round grades on that are still on the board include Will Johnson, Savon Revel, Trey Amos from Ole Miss. I have a late 1, early 2 on him. And then I have second round grades on Darian Porter from Iowa State, former wide receiver, converted over to corner a couple years ago. Benjamin Morrison, who has an injury flag with what sounds like a hip labrum issue, where he missed some time last year. And then you have Jacob Parrish from Kansas State, who's a little undersized, but man, is he a mean, feisty, scrappy player. And then at safety, Nicky Minori has a first-round grade. We've acknowledged his existence. Xavier Watts from Notre Dame. He has a late 1, early 2 grade. He's still on the board. And then Andrew Makuba from Texas. Again, another little bit of an undersized player. Both Parrish and Makuba, if those guys were prototype sizes for their positions and didn't have some elements of their game that were impacted by being a little undersized, you'd be talking about guys that would probably be grading next to Eamon and Savon Revel in their respective position bands. Like, I think they're that good of caliber of players. There's some limitations based on their statures. So you add up safety, corner, and offensive linemen. You've got 3 safeties, Makuba, Watts, and Eamon. You've got Parrish, Morrison, Porter, Amos, Revel, Will Johnson, 6. So you have 9 DBs. And then you have at offensive line, 1, 2, 3, 4 names. That's 13. You do the math, the Dolphins picking at 48, they're the 16th pick today. So you only need a handful of names to come off the board. And that doesn't get into Mason Taylor and Elijah Arroyo at tight end as really talented players that are still out there. Luther Burden is still out there at wide receiver. You have Travion Henderson, who is a late 1, early 2 grade for me for the Dolphins scheme at running back. Shadur Sanders is out there. Is he going to go in the first 8 picks today to somebody, whether that's the Raiders or the Browns or somebody else? Set the stage to say the math is the math. You're going to have somebody that you really like that's available to you. Are there any BPAs that are going to shake me off of O-line, corner, safety? We explore those names a little bit here next. Locked On Dolphins. Stick with us. The NBA playoffs are here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on all of the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if that first bet wins. FanDuel makes it easy to bet, whether you're betting on the Heat or diving into player props, from three-pointers to steals, assists. FanDuel has so many ways for you to bet your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even double and combine with live prop bets into same-game parlays for a chance to win big. Don't miss out. Head over to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. Realistically speaking, the realm and world of possibility. I'm going to stay zoomed out if you're watching on YouTube, but like it's not meant to be. I don't want you to sit here and nitpick through the names. If you want the board, you can get it over at Touchdown Miami on Substack. Right? It's available for you there over on Substack for you to download a copy for yourself so you can really get into the weeds with it. But the world and realm in which I am totally foregoing need, and I'm just authentically going to pick what I think is the best player, is the world and realm and possibility in which Will Johnson, Savon Revel, and Trey Amos are gone at corner. Those are the 3 corners that are graded as first round and late 1, early 2 grades. And then if you get Nicky Minori and Xavier Watts that are gone, I have no offensive linemen left in this bucket anyway. So if this DB, this upper band of 5 names at DB gets totally cleared out between 33 and 48, and then you kind of get into the middle of the second round band where maybe Darian Porter goes and you don't like Benjamin Morrison's injury history and you're a little leery about Makuba's size and Jacob Parrish's size and some of the offensive linemen that you feel like, if you're capable with any of the 4 of them to play right away, if they're off the board, if you're sitting here looking at a player that's in the late 1, early 2 bucket, that's still available, whether that's Travion Henderson, Luther Burden, Izaraku's in this bucket. I'd be surprised if Izaraku still makes it, although it's not easy to find like a spot based on the position runs that have happened, and it is a deep edge group. But maybe that's disqualified because you're feeling like you have the depth that you need and you're kind of financially committed to this group and you want to see if you need any long-term commitments out of that group. I fully expect Shadur Sanders to go to either Cleveland, New Orleans, or Las Vegas. So I don't think he makes it to 48 to have kind of that big quarterback conversation about a second-round pick with Tua's durability stuff. You're maybe looking at a skill player in a Henderson or a Luther Burden being in a tier by themselves, and then you have to drop down to the next tier and potentially more than halfway through the next tier to get the names at the positions that you need. Would I stick and pick a running back at 48 or a wide receiver at 48 as compared to drafting for need? In a perfect world, I would simply take the trade back option, right? Can I get somebody to come up who really wants one of these players that's still left in kind of the last names in this band? Because if the answer is yes, then maybe I can kick down 10 spots. And then I feel like I'm a little bit more of an appropriate bucket. And then I achieve that thing that we've been trying and talking about doing, which is adding more draft cap. You need the partner, though. You need a dance partner. I don't see a single name, and this is why it's important to not just read the headline of the show and actually hear and watch the show, right? I'm going to put myself full screen here. I do not see myself in a world and a realm where the preferred option is to stick and pick a skill player versus trying to collect the extra capital, getting back into a band where I feel like I'm in appropriate value for the pick, and making one of those picks. Because you can maybe have the conversation based on it being what I think is a position in which you could have a player earn snaps, a Mason Taylor if he's there at 48. He's not even 21 years old yet. He's a young player with receiving chops and speed, legacy player for the Dolphins organization. Can play inline tight end in addition to being a flex player. And we've talked about how that role on the offense needs to be better to help the running game be better. I'm pretty intrigued if Mason Taylor's there, because he would be in the same bucket and more highly graded than any of the offensive linemen, any of the corners, or any of the safeties that I have. Mason Taylor in just the second round bucket of all talented, all positions, is the highest graded player in that bucket. Now, the challenge is going to be, is there a corner or a safety that's available in the higher banded bucket, which I kind of think there will be at least one, whether it's Watts or Eamon Worry or Trey Amos, or maybe Savon Revel makes it. And if that's the case, then that's probably the play, assuming the medical's clear. That's how I would handle it. But of course, I'm not making the decisions. I can only go through my process and my board and share it with each and every one of you, as we've been doing, and kind of explore the dynamics of as these names get checked off and grayed out, and you can kind of see in living color where the eligible players are and where the value still exists in the board. So it's going to be a fun night. We are going to be a little bit more prompt. I'm not doing the live stream tonight that I did with Joe Marino on Locked On NFL Scouting, which means as the Dolphins make moves and make picks, we'll be talking about them in real time. We'll be getting up. We'll be getting shows up quick turns around. So make sure you are subscribed on the YouTube channel or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. So as we drop new content tonight, you guys can follow along. Kyle Krabs, you can keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. I appreciate you guys as always for checking out the show. And I'll talk to you all again tonight.